Welcome into the News 10 Plus Digital Desk. I'm Taylor Gattoni, joined by First Alert meteorologist Justin Bradford on the Severe Weather Awareness Week.
Yes, so officially the week started yesterday. We go Sunday through Saturday, the 17th through the 23rd, and right in the middle of that on Wednesday, we're going to have a statewide tornado drill. Now, some counties are and some counties aren't participating in this as far as the sirens go. We're going to have updates on that once we really have an idea of everybody who has opted in or opted out. We're going to share that with you so that if you do or don't hear the siren, you'll know what's going on. And also one other thing to make note of, there is no severe weather expected at any point this week. So if you do happen to hear that siren, in all likelihood, everything is okay. It's just a plan to test the severe emergency awareness system so that we have that ready to go for when we do have to deal with severe weather. And of course, some of us have already had to deal with that this year, unfortunately. So we just want to be prepared, and that's what this week's all about.
Yes, and as we saw last year from all the severe storms and even tornadoes that swept through parts of mid-Michigan and even other parts of Michigan, FEMA is still helping out and assisting homes and businesses, those residents in those homes, that is, and making sure that they're taken care of. And that was from last August. So this is why our meteorologists are making sure that you are all in the know when you head out the door, you're inside of your own home and there's weather happening.
Yeah, and this week is one of the big reasons why we First Alert. It's something that we bring to the forefront every year because we want to be ready, because for a lot of the year we don't have to deal with many of these threats, but there are parts of the year we're getting into now where we do, and where it's most common is usually kind of that late April through May and into early June time frame that we highlight. That's when we have the most clash with warm and cold air. We can get the big storms. Of course, we have them in the late summer too and into the fall like we saw last August, but the area where it's most common is going to be the time of year we're coming into. And so we want to be ready for that, and we want to get you and everybody ready for any of those events. We help you plan for a variety of different type of events with several topics. We're talking about flooding, hail, tornadoes, thunderstorms, and lightning, and then we're going to dive into a little bit more about the weather history, fact or fiction, and take all your questions on Friday as well. But we're happy to answer any of those today too. Today's topic will be flooding, and we'll cover hail tomorrow, and so that'll be a discussion we have for Tuesday about hail. That I'm very fascinated by hail. I've got a couple fun graphics to share with it, but flooding, again, very important, very serious, and so we're going to talk about that first and foremost today.
Yes, exactly. And like Justin was just saying, we have this chat open so you can ask questions. I know some things are already coming down this week. Rebecca asking how much snow accumulation for this week, and we're going to be talking a lot about that. You'll have to join us for the 2 o'clock right here for more of that. But we are talking about Severe Weather Awareness Week all day, or not all day, every day this week starting at noon. So thank you for joining us for those who are.
Yeah, and so this, again, is going to be something that is going on every day at 12 o'clock. And so, again, we hope you'll tune back with us on any of our platforms. We'll be discussing this in great detail. And then even during our newscasts today, over the air, we will be discussing some of these topics as well. But we are going to waste no time, get right into it today with flooding. And there are two different types that are kind of most common around here that we see. Now, these are flood warnings, and they are flash flood warnings. Now, in the green there, the flood warnings, this is kind of generally a river water overflow most of the time when this happens. Now, these are usually kind of longer term events, so let's just use this as an example. It is not an issue right now, but let's say that the Grand River in Lansing is starting to rise out of its banks. You may see a flood warning that gets issued on, let's say, a Tuesday, and it might last into a Friday or even a Saturday. And so that's kind of what we're expecting with a flood warning. It gives you a little time, at least, when a flood warning comes down, when it's a regular flood warning, for you to kind of put your plan into action and sort of figure out what you need to do, what steps you need to take. Now, you contrast that with a flash flood warning. Now, these tend to be due to excessive rainfall, something that happens pretty suddenly, pretty quickly. You get a fast 2 to 3 inches of rain in just a couple hours, and these tend to affect urban areas most commonly. So larger streams that normally are used as runoff basins, those start to overflow, and this again happens really quickly. It can also happen as a result of things like dam failures. Now, that's an extreme version, but we did see that in state happen a couple years ago with the Sanford Dam, with Wixom and Sanford Lakes up in the Midland area up towards that direction, and those lakes still have not recovered from that. Of course, that whole area had major issues as a result of that dam failure. Now, again, flash flood warnings those are going to be the ones where you had better already have a plan in place and have talked about it if you're going to want to salvage any of the items that you have that are in locations that are experiencing a flash flood or anything of that regard. So for flood warnings, you've got a little more flexibility with the timing. It's not something that's going to come right up on you. It's going to slowly kind of creep up, and you want to be able to put your plan in place. With a flash flood warning, have your plan ready before that happens, because by the time the flood's coming up, you may have seconds to get into an area that is safe. And so you want to have that plan in place. So that's kind of the difference between those two. Now, when a flood is taking place, whether it's a flood warning or you're seeing flash flooding, you want to be prepared, if necessary, to evacuate your home. You definitely want to stay out of floodwaters, and you want to be cautious, especially at nighttime when it's more difficult to see, because at least during the day you can normally see where a water level's at, even if it's climbing. Well, at nighttime, you really don't get that visibility, especially if you're in a flood. It's most likely still raining at that point in time, so it's also cloudy and very dark. You're not even going to get the aid of the moonlight, and you may lose power in the event of severe weather and during a flood, and so you want to be cautious when it comes to that. Now, when you're driving with flood safety, we always tout this phrase: turn around, don't drown. You do not want to drive through flooded streets. And some of these issues arise when people drive into floods because they don't realize just how little water it takes to have an impact on your vehicle. Some people, they hydroplane, they think, oh, it's no big deal. Well, sometimes you don't know exactly how deep that water is, and even if you think you do, the road may not even be there, or it may be damaged. And this has happened in the past, unfortunately, to some people, where they drive through an area, a road that they know, and say, oh, well, it can't be more than 5-6 inches deep. And they drive through it, and their car drives straight down into the river or whatnot, because the water has washed away the road, and you just can't tell by looking at the flood level. And so you never want to drive through flooded streets out there. I did have a couple flooding facts that I compiled and threw together. So flooding, it's in more than 90% of all natural disasters that take place. And so this is going to be your most common, and this is why we started with it on this Monday, is the primary reason. It is your most common natural disaster. Now, it doesn't have the flair of tornadoes or hurricanes or anything like that, but it is kind of almost the silent killer in a way, because flooding does kill more people in the United States and worldwide than lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes. And so those tend to be the ones that grab people's attention because of the violent nature of those other three. But floods are the most deadly weather impactful event in the United States. The only one that maybe rivals it a little bit is extreme heat, which of course is a whole different discussion, not necessarily severe weather, even though it is extreme. So we'll discuss heat as we get closer towards the summertime, and where we start to see some more of those dangerous days. Now, this is another thing that I wanted people to know, the flooding facts at the bottom. Just a foot, 12 inches of fast-moving water can not only float, but even carry away a small vehicle, depending on how fast it is. So even if you look at water and think, oh man, it only goes halfway up my tires, that water could still carry away a small car. And 6 inches is all it takes to sweep you off your feet. And so, again, rushing water facts here: 6 inches of water can knock you down, 12 inches of water can float cars, and really 18 to 24 inches can carry them away. And you really don't have any idea of how deep that water is. I know personally there are some pockets of roadway in mid-Michigan that tend to get flooded during big rain events that I make sure to try to avoid, because I know that the water can get deep in those spots. The sewers just aren't able to handle it in those infrastructured areas, and you want to just avoid that at all costs. If you can wait even to allow vehicles even on the other side of the road, if you've got it on one side, to let those vehicles pass and then make your way completely around the floodwater, that is always the best option, because you don't want to drive into any of this. And so that's, again, something that's very important that you want to keep in mind.
Well, even with all the construction and potholes around mid-Michigan and Michigan, you want to make sure that you know where you're going. Even with the changing roads, you may not be comfortable with the roadways that you're now taking. Yeah,
exactly. And so you want to make sure, again, to have a plan not only for what to have with you in the event of flooding, but also where you're going to go, right? I mean, if you know that there are areas that tend to have more water on the roadways, you want to avoid those spots too. And certainly areas that you have to cross rivers or streams, you want to be mindful of that, because if those water levels come up, they can wash those roadways away at times, and we have had that happen on occasion here in mid-Michigan. And so hopefully you don't have to deal with this, but of course that's the case with all of our severe weather topics. We hope you never will have to deal with any of these, but ultimately some of us will. It happens every year, and we want you to be prepared in the best way possible when that does happen. And so we're going to go ahead here to show you another thing. We haven't had to deal with this much because there hasn't been much ice, but we wanted to talk about ice jams because in any given year, this can be a problem on area rivers. And so here's something that is kind of interesting with how this goes. So let's say you got a river that freezes up, or you have large pieces of ice on a river. Well, they're floating on down and everything's good. You don't have any worries. You know, we've got the spring melt. Everybody's excited to get to the warmer weather. Well, then those ice jams run into an obstruction. It could be a dock, it could be a bridge, it could be a narrower point of the river, and those ice flows all come together, and they certainly will jam and bottleneck up, and they're not able to get through those areas and down the river. Well, what has to happen as a result? Well, the water is still going to try to find its way around the ice jams, and that's going to expand the river at those banks, at least until the ice flows are able to either melt enough or are broken up and can go down through. And so you're going to see the river banks expand, even if you can have instances, and this does happen every year when we have ice, where there might not even be rain. It might just be ice is floating down the river, it's been sunny all week, and suddenly we're talking about floods. Well, how's that possible? It's because of things like this, and that's how an ice jam works. And so you want to be mindful of that too, especially if you're watching us and you live near an area, river, stream, or creek that tends to have this happen. And so the shallower bodies of water are easier to freeze, the ones that aren't as fast flowing, and so when you get into that in the wintertime, this can be a major issue. And so we just wanted a quick explainer on ice jams and how they work and what you want to do. Now, of course, everybody has got a home, whether you're in a house, apartment, whatever. You're going to want to do a couple things when it comes to home flooding safety. You're going to want to first check your homeowner's policy if you've got a house. Make sure that you've got insurance. And I think that's certainly good, especially if you live in an area that's prone to flooding. Even if you have never had an issue with flooding, this can cause issues with your sump pump if you have one of those. Your basement can flood out, and of course, certainly if you're not insured, you can have huge, massive losses with this, and even if you are, it's not fun to deal with. And so foundational issues on the house are another thing to consider. These are all things that, again, can come up in the blink of an eye. If we have a sudden really heavy rain event that covers a lot of mid-Michigan, you happen to get 4 inches of rain at your house, well, some other lucky folks 10 miles to the south don't have to deal with the rain at all. You could be the one having to deal with this. And so it's good to know when you're talking about home flooding and safety that these are some things that you want to keep in mind. And so that's another thing that we want to make note of. I see Clarissa is giving us a question here, a map that she can view of flood areas in Ingham County. I don't know of any specific maps off the top of my head. I wish I could be a little more helpful with that just right away, but knowing just general areas from experience, if you've lived in an area for a while, you've probably seen at this point, if you're in Ingham County in certain areas, the spots that tend to flood a little more easily. I know we get over towards the Red Cedar and Potter Park Zoo. That area tends to flood out quite a bit near Sycamore Park that way. And so there are a few areas specifically that tend to be prone to flooding. And when there's major events that come up, those are the areas that we normally first focus on. Certainly as a news organization, those are the first places that we get calls. Oh, we've got roads flooded out, or we've got impassable areas. That tends to be one of the first areas that come to mind.
Anything with the bodies of water. Or,
anywhere.
Streams,
yes,
rivers.
that's the big thing. If you're particularly close to a riverbank or a lake or anything like that, you're probably more likely than other spots in mid-Michigan to have to deal with flooding. And so I would kind of just start there, and wherever you are living, for Clarissa and anybody else watching, see where you are in proximity to area rivers or creeks or anything like that. If you just find a general map wherever you have to go, library or online or anything, you can also probably pull up your Maps feature on your phone, whatever that may be, whether it's iPhone, Google, whatever. Pull up a Maps feature and get kind of a satellite view. You can tell how close you are to a river or stream, and that can usually give you a good idea as far as how close you are to the body of water and whether or not you're prone to flooding.
Though in that and low-lying areas. So,
Yeah.
and also if you're in a concrete jungle a little bit, or more concrete sidewalks like
Yeah.
downtown Lansing,
Right.
as opposed to East Lansing, where you have more of that greenery, more of the grass that can soak in the water as best as it can.
Yeah, and that's the other big thing is if you've got solid concrete or you've got hard ground, it's going to be tougher for that to run off, especially if sometimes sewer drains during these big events, they get blocked off. And so you'll notice that even though things look like they should be draining, you can have debris, whether sometimes it's garbage, just anything, leaves, whatever, all floats down and goes to where that drain is because it's trying to drain like the water. Now, when those things all block the drain, it can be difficult for that water to get down through the drain and through the grate. And sometimes, if they completely block it, you might not have water going down those drains at all. And so you want to make sure that, again, if you're driving into a flooded area and you know or think that you know what the road is like there, you always want to avoid those spots because you always could run into issues with that. And so those are all things to consider when it comes to flooding.
You are a recent homeowner, Justin, and we do have a question saying that my insurance company says they don't offer flood insurance. What would you recommend in this situation?
Okay, yeah, so I would say for Shirley, and again, anybody else, thank you for your question, Shirley. If you don't or are unable for some reason to get flood insurance or anything through your home, if it's not offered, it says by your insurance company, I mean, I would consider, I'm not exactly sure what the other options would be as far as if you can maybe go through another insurance provider just maybe for flooding or something like that. If you're planning on trying to ride it out without having to go that route, then I would say, again, just educate yourself as best you can and just know not necessarily that you're rolling the dice, quote unquote, but I mean that if there is an area where you live that is prone to flooding, again, those could be major losses, major issues to your property, and even life if it's a really intense flood. Of course, you want to get to the roof of your home if possible, or at least to a higher area if you're dealing with flooding. Now, if you live up on a hill in your neighborhood, you're probably okay. We're probably not going to have a major event like Noah's Ark or anything that comes through where you have that happening. But if you are in a low-lying area, and you would know just driving through your neighborhood whether or not you're lower or higher than the other homes, you're going to want to make sure that you do something about that. At least have a plan in place because it's really tough when you are suddenly faced with the situation of there's been a flash flood warning issued, I don't have a plan, water's already climbing, it's probably going to be, if it's not already, might be into my home or my basement soon, and at that point it's too late. So that's why you want to have a plan in place now.
Yes, and even if you aren't going to get that flooding in your home, like Justin said, having a plan so when or if it does happen, you automatically know what to do, where to go, the things that you need. So if you live in an apartment complex, Shirley, this might be the time to ask the management, see if they take care of anything for you so that you don't have to worry about all of the flooding with your insurance company.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes.
And so I appreciate these questions. These are all very great and helpful for kind of understanding what you need to do and what kind of plan you want to have in place moving forward. And so once again, for those home flood safety tips, certainly something to keep in mind. That's probably one of the more important ones that we share because ultimately this is your life and this is impacts to you. We just want to help you be prepared for when that happens, if it does here in Mid-Michigan. Again, hopefully we don't have to deal with that, but we are covering a variety of topics throughout this week on Severe Weather Awareness Week. As I mentioned, we've been talking about flooding as you've all listened to and sat through with us today. We're also going to be discussing tomorrow the effects of hail. Now, we see hail from time to time, and we already have in some spots this year, but, you know, a lot of people aren't as familiar with the process of hail and just what kind of damage that it can cause because normally we see more wind damage here or we sometimes even deal with tornadoes, which we'll discuss Wednesday, and then thunderstorms, very common. We know we all see those, and that'll be Thursday's discussion. But tomorrow we wanted to talk about hail, so we hope you'll join us again at noon tomorrow for that discussion. Once again, all week long here, we are going to be discussing this every day on the platform you're viewing us from, and we hope that you'll continue to tune in with us. We've also got updates on our air and throughout multiple updates we'll be doing over these next several days. And the First Alert Weather app is always a great place to get that info because in addition to your forecast, which of course we'll have coming up and is always available at that free First Alert Weather app, you can also get videos on these topics, which we will be posting to our app throughout the week. At least a couple short videos kind of describing a few of what we've talked about today. And that will address the topic of the day, which once again today is flooding. So if you are interested in learning about hail, I have some very cool graphics that I love sharing every time I get the opportunity. Obviously, I don't want anybody to ever have to deal with damaging hail especially, but I have a couple graphics showing how it forms, what kind of impacts we get from them, the largest hailstone ever recorded, have a photo of that to share. And so we'll have a good discussion on that tomorrow. We hope you'll join us then. We'll try to be right at 12 o'clock every day this week so that you can tune in with us then during this Severe Weather Awareness Week. And once more, that statewide tornado drill is going to be taking place 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And so that's sort of going to be the height of the Severe Weather Awareness Week here. But we'll be discussing it all week long here on News 10. Of course, the irony is that we're discussing severe weather when we've already dealt with it and warmer air. And now we got a whole week of temps in the 30s almost every day and snow flurries. And so
Thanks, Mother Nature.
Yeah, Mother Nature's got a great sense of humor. She's very ironic. We all know that well. But again, very important topics. And really, if anything, this is a better week to be discussing it because, you know, when we're dealing with snow in 30s, you're not even usually thinking about severe weather. And so for us to have that weather this week almost works to our advantage because this is our time when there's no severe weather and when it's cold and snowy for us to plan for when it's nicer, but then, you know, the storms roll in. We want to be ready for that.
Yes. Well, again, all this week at noon, you can join us here at the News 10 Plus digital desk. I'll either be here with Justin or Colton or one of the other meteorologists informing you on what you need to know for Severe Weather Awareness Week. Again, tomorrow, Justin will be here talking about hail. Yeah,
we're excited to talk about that. And of all the topics this week, I know that I believe I'll have hail tomorrow. Colton will be covering tornadoes on Wednesday, thunderstorms on Thursday, and then the Q&A for weather on Friday. But we've got you covered, again, across all platforms, and then also on our live shows that we'll be having today. We'll be discussing some of these as well. And so, of course, as always, we hope you'll join us for all our programs here on News 10 today as we continue to keep you safe and prepared, most importantly, during Severe Weather Awareness Week.
Yes. Well, anything else you'd like to add in here before we're back here at 2 o'clock? For our regular streaming.
Yeah, I think, we'll have more. We've had a question from Rebecca early on in the forecast. How much snow accumulation this week? Rebecca, I hate to leave you hanging, but at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a very detailed look at what's to come, including potential accumulation. I'll give you a hint here. We're not expecting any of that these next few days, but we might be at the end of the week. And so tune in for the amounts, and we'll have that for you at 2 o'clock. We hope you'll join us for that.
All right. Well, thank you, Justin, for the info.
Of course. Yes.
We'll be back soon.
Yep. Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Have a good Monday, everyone.